understand why he made the choices he made. It's not just like an open and closed book. You're curious as to what he was thinking when he married Barbara.
I'm going to take care of his family, you know, and I really meant that from here. And that's what happened, but people looked at it different.
They said it was all lies. They said the stories were too wild to be true. But then Bobby Womack's diary was found. And page after page, it confirmed the scandals no one believed.
So now to our breaking news, the death at the age of 70 of the American singer-songwriter Bobby Womack.
From his messy marriage to his mentor's wife, to a strange and unsettling situation with his teenage stepdaughter, along with other family secrets and broken relationships. The diary shattered the myth and revealed the darker, chaotic truth about Bobby Womack's life.
I lost a lot of friends because nobody wanted to be around me anymore. They're like, man, this cat is tripping.
Let's get into it. So here's the thing about Bobby Womack. If there was one trait that defined him outside of the music, it was his audacity. This man's boldness was on another level, and nowhere did it show more than in the decision he made right at the peak of his career. A decision so wild, so controversial, that it shook people close to him, and it left a stain on Bobby's career that many argue he never fully shook off. But to really understand just how crazy that move was, you gotta know the backstory. Back in the 1950s, Bobby Womack's journey in music started in the most traditional way you could imagine, through the church. He was part of his family's gospel group, the Womack Brothers, a little crew that his father organized. They were a tight-knit group of brothers harmonizing on gospel tunes, and that's where Bobby got his foundation.
At the Baptist church, the most important thing that I learned was how to relate spiritually to people.
Now this is where fate steps in. Bobby's dad managed to land the group an opening spot for the Soul Stirrers, one of the biggest gospel groups of that era, and their lead singer was none other than Sam Cooke. Meeting Sam was life-changing for young Bobby. Sam wasn't just a star, he was already turning into this larger-than-life figure, someone who could blend church soul with mainstream appeal. Bobby immediately looked up to him, and Sam, for his part, took a liking to Bobby and the brothers.
We got standing ovation at the church.
Fast forward a few years, Sam Cooke starts his own record label in 1961, SAR Records, and he decides to sign the Womack Brothers. Now, at first, things didn't exactly take off. They dropped a few singles, including one called Couldn't Hear Nobody Pray, but none of them made any real noise. The gospel lane just wasn't breaking them through to the masses. Sam, being the visionary he was, realized this and pulled Bobby and his brothers aside. He basically said gospel wasn't going to cut it for them right now. So if they really want to blow up, they'll need to switch lanes, go secular, go mainstream. That was a huge suggestion back then, because leaving gospel for worldly music was seen as almost scandalous in church circles. But Bobby trusted Sam.
It was hard for me to tell my father that we didn't want to sing gospel anymore. He went off. He said, I've spent all this time working with you guys, and you guys want to go to the devil.
So the group reinvented themselves. Sam renamed them the Valentinos. And under that new identity, they recorded a track called Looking for a Love. That song was basically a reworked, poppier version of Couldn't Hear Nobody Pray. And it worked. The song hit the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at 72, and went on to sell over 2 million copies. For a group of young black men coming out of gospel, that was huge.
And I know I'm gonna get crucified for this. You know, always thinking that, I say, it's just like I'm putting God down and I'm going to the devil with these lyrics. But the audience bought it.
Bobby especially grew closer to Sam Cooke during this time. Sam became like a mentor, almost a big brother figure. He taught Bobby about music, the industry, even life, Bobby was his protege, soaking up everything.
Now that the Valentinos were signed to Sam Cooke's SAR Records, one of the very first things he did was put Bobby and his brothers through showbiz boot camp.
But then, tragedy hit. In 1964, Sam Cooke's life was cut short in one of the most shocking and mysterious deaths in music history. He was killed at the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles. The story that came out was that the motel manager shot him, claiming it was self-defense. But even back then, the details didn't add up. There were conflicting reports, suspicious circumstances. It left more questions than answers. To this day, people debate what really happened that night. Sam's death devastated the music world. He wasn't just a singer, he was a trailblazer, someone who had opened doors for black artists to own their masters, start their own labels, and demand fairer treatment in an industry that was stacked against them. Losing him was like losing a leader. Naturally, his funeral was massive. Actually, there were two funeral services. The first was on December 18, 1964, at Tabernacle Baptist Church in Chicago. That one was huge. Over 200,000 people showed up to pay their respects. The crowd included everyone from everyday fans to big names like Muhammad Ali. Then, the second service was held the very next day, December 19th, at Mount Sinai Baptist Church in Los Angeles. And here's where Bobby Womack, at just 20 years old, pulled one of the boldest and most controversial moves in music history.
I was so crazy about Sam that the first thing that I said, I'm gonna protect his family.
When he showed up at that Los Angeles funeral, he didn't come quietly. He walked in wearing Sam Cooke's suits. Not just that, he drove up in Sam Cooke's car, and the biggest bombshell of them all was him holding hands with Barbara Cooke, Sam Cooke's widow. At first, some people tried to brush it off. A few folks figured maybe he was just trying to be there for Barbara since he was young, close to Sam, and had spent so much time around the family. It didn't necessarily look like a scandal right away, but that illusion didn't last long, because just a couple months later, Bobby and Barbara took things to a whole different level. Only 77 days after Sam Cooke's death, Bobby, just 20 years old at the time, and Barbara, who was 10 years older than him, shocked everybody when they tried to get married. To put it in perspective, Sam hadn't even been gone 3 full months, and already his widow was about to walk down the aisle with his young protege. The public couldn't believe it, and honestly, neither could a lot of people in the music industry. And to make things worse, Bobby showed up to the Los Angeles County Courthouse for the marriage attempt wearing another one of Sam Cooke's suits. To fans, that was like spitting on Sam's memory. It wasn't just bold, it felt disrespectful in the most personal way. Here was this young man who had been like Sam's little brother, literally stepping into his life, his car, his clothes, and now, his wife. Now, the first time Bobby and Barbara tried to tie the knot, the courthouse actually rejected them. The reason was, Bobby was underage, 20 years old, and didn't have parental permission to marry. But that rejection didn't stop them. They weren't about to give up. Instead, they waited until Bobby's 21st birthday rolled around, and the very next day, March 5th, 1965, they made it official. But this wasn't some fairy tale wedding or a moment of celebration. Their marriage wasn't greeted with smiles and congratulations. Instead, it marked the beginning of Bobby's downfall in terms of reputation. What he thought would be a new chapter in his personal life turned into a nightmare of backlash and rejection. Within the soul music community, the response was brutal. To say Bobby and Barbara's relationship was poorly received is putting it lightly. People were angry, disgusted, even threatening. Fans saw it as a betrayal of Sam's memory, and they didn't hold back. Hate mail poured in by the dozens. According to the New York Times, it got so bad that someone even sent them a package with a baby doll in a coffin, a chilling message that made it clear how deep the resentment ran. And the backlash didn't just come from outsiders. Bobby's own family turned their backs on him. In his memoir, Bobby Womack, Midnight Mover, he talked about how his marriage to Barbara tore his family apart. He said, "My brothers were reluctant to be around me. They knew the threats that were out there against me for marrying Barbara. They didn't know what to do, but without them, I was totally alone, all by myself. And because my mother and father had been against the marriage to Barbara, there was no family in my corner."
Take care of his family, you know, and I really meant that from here. And that's what happened, but people looked at it different.
And if Bobby thought that was bad, the Cook family made sure that things got even harder. They wanted nothing to do with him. They saw his marriage to Barbara as an unforgivable betrayal, and none of them were shy about letting him know it. One of the most chilling confrontations came from Charles Cook, Sam's brother. Shortly after the wedding, Charles said, "Man, anyone else could have married Sam's wife. But you? Sam loved you, man. If you ever come to Chicago..." Charles didn't even have to finish the sentence. The threat hung in the air heavy, and Bobby knew exactly what it meant. His life wouldn't be safe if he showed his face around Sam's old stomping grounds. And soon, things were about to get serious. In his memoir, Bobby actually recounts a wild and violent altercation with Charles Cook, Sam's brother, in Chicago. After Charles had already given Bobby that ominous warning about never showing his face in Chicago again, Bobby admitted that his mentality at the time was, "If Charlie's gonna do something, let's just get it over with." So, Bobby and Barbara hopped on a plane to Chicago and checked into the Roberts Motel. They weren't sneaking around either. Bobby literally picked up the phone and called Charles, telling him where they were staying. Room 2112. And while Bobby was setting up this confrontation, Barbara, who definitely had her own tough streak, was in the room loading bullets into a pistol. It didn't take long for Charles to show up, and he wasn't alone. He rolled in with two of his brothers, David and LC. When Bobby opened the door, Charles didn't waste a second. He punched him right in the face. What followed wasn't just a fight, it was a beatdown. Bobby described it vividly, his head swelling up like a melon, his teeth going through his lip, his jaw broken, and eventually being beaten unconscious.
I think he got 3 or 4 broken ribs, and his jaws broke, and his eyes were swollen up. You couldn't even see out of them,
While all this was happening, Barbara was screaming in the bathroom. She came rushing out with the gun in her hand, aimed it at Charles, and pulled the trigger. But it just clicked. The gun jammed, or so she thought. But what actually happened was, Bobby had removed the bullets earlier when Barbara wasn't looking, probably knowing that Barbara wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger and someone would have died that day. Eventually, Charles and his brothers left Bobby bloodied and barely conscious. The cops were called, and when they saw the state Bobby was in, they told him Charles was looking at jail time for the assault. They even arrested Charles that same night. But Bobby chose not to press charges. Charles was released, and Bobby and Barbara just carried on with their lives as if nothing had happened. Now, here's where it gets even messier. You'd think after going through this whole us against the world ordeal, their own twisted Bonnie and Clyde moment, Bobby and Barbara would be tighter than ever. But no, their marriage was already on the road to collapse, and the breaking point came in 1970. See, Bobby's audacity knew no limits. As if marrying his mentor's widow wasn't enough, he took it even further by crossing the ultimate line. He started messing around with Barbara's teenage daughter, Linda. In his own words, Bobby admitted to what happened. He described one night when he and Linda, who was 17 years old at the time, were in her room. They were lying down, kissing, when suddenly the lights flicked on. Standing in the doorway was Barbara, and she went off. According to Bobby, Barbara screamed, "You dirty effing bastard, what are you doing with my daughter?" She didn't wait for an explanation. Instead, Barbara grabbed her gun, pointed it at Bobby, and chased him out of the house. As Bobby was sprinting away, she fired a shot, grazing him in the head. That was it. The marriage was done. By 1971, After 6 chaotic years and 1 son together, Vincent, Barbara divorced Bobby. But even then, the drama didn't end. Bobby, for a while, tried to pursue a relationship with Linda after the divorce. But Linda wasn't having it. She didn't want him. Instead, she ended up falling for someone else. And not just anyone. She got with Cecil Womack, Bobby's own brother. Together, Linda and Cecil had 7 kids and formed a musical duo, Womack and Womack, which turned out to be pretty successful. They dropped hits like Baby I'm Scared of You and carved out their own legacy in the music world. So just to put all this in perspective, Bobby married his mentor Sam Cooke's widow, Barbara. While married to Barbara, Bobby had an affair with her teenage daughter, Linda. After the divorce, Linda turned around and married Bobby's brother, Cecil. Then, Linda and Cecil went on to have a family and a music career together. The whole family dynamic was, and still is, one of the wildest and most controversial stories in soul music history. But even with all of the chaos, scandals, and family drama that surrounded Bobby Womack's life, one thing you can't deny is that the man's career still soared. For all the controversy, Bobby had this rare talent that kept pushing him forward. His voice, his songwriting, his guitar work, it was undeniable. And despite the judgment and whispers, he carved out a powerful solo career that made him one of the most respected figures in soul music.
What do you do to relax?
Well, I get a chance to steal away every now and then when my manager have pity on me and let me write a little bit. If I'm writing songs, I can relax.
But while the music was flying high, Bobby's personal life was full of devastating losses, heartbreaks, and tragedies that weighed heavily on him for decades. After his messy marriage with Barbara Cooke ended, Bobby remarried. His second wife was Evelyn Evans, who started out as his personal secretary. Bobby was 29 when he married her, but that relationship eventually faded into the background. Then, on December 31st, 1975, Bobby got married again, this time to 19-year-old Regina Banks. That marriage brought 3 children into his life. Things between Bobby and Regina were rocky, though. In the early 1990s, she left him and moved to New York. They were apart for decades, but in an almost full-circle kind of way, they found each other again and eventually remarried in 2013. In total, Bobby fathered 6 children, but tragically, 2 of them passed away before he did. His very first child, Vincent Dwayne Womack, was born in 1966 during his marriage to Barbara. But Vincent's life ended in heartbreak. At just 21 years old, he died by suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. For Bobby, losing his son like that was a wound that never really healed. With Regina, Bobby had 3 more children, Truth Bobby, Bobby Truth, and a daughter named Gina. But once again, tragedy struck. Truth Bobby, whose name was actually suggested by Bobby's eccentric friend Sly Stone, died when he was just 4 months old. The baby had fallen into a coma after being found wedged between a wall and the bed. According to reports, Regina had asked Bobby to check on the child earlier, but instead, Bobby smoked some pot. That choice haunted him forever. The baby's death sent Bobby spiraling even deeper into addiction, something he had been battling on and off throughout his life. As for his other son with Regina, Bobby Truth, things weren't much easier. By the time he was 11 or 12 years old, Bobby Truth was already caught up in the streets. He got involved with gangs and eventually landed in a youth detention center. But the tragedies weren't limited to his children. Bobby also lost his brother, Harry Womack, in one of the most shocking family incidents imaginable. In 1974, Harry was fatally stabbed in the neck with a steak knife by his girlfriend, Patricia Wilson. The reason was because of jealous rage. Patricia had discovered another woman's clothes in Harry's room and assumed he was cheating. The heartbreaking twist was that those clothes didn't even belong to Harry. They belonged to Bobby's girlfriend, who had left them there. Because of all this, a lot of people looked at Bobby's life and saw it as a story of karma. that maybe all the bad decisions he made earlier, all the betrayals, had come back around to haunt him. And when you look at the sheer amount of tragedy and loss that followed him, it's hard not to see that angle. But still, Bobby Womack pushed forward in the only way he knew how. Through music. No matter what demons he battled, no matter what storms swirled around his personal life, he kept creating. He kept writing, recording, and performing. His resilience turned him into something bigger than just another singer. He became an icon. Later in his career, Bobby's contributions to music were finally recognized on the highest levels. He earned a Grammy nomination, and in 2009, he was officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, cementing his place in history as one of the greats. But his final years were tough. Bobby's health began to decline. He developed diabetes, and in March 2012, it was revealed that he'd been diagnosed with colon cancer. Bobby later confirmed he would be undergoing surgery, and thankfully, by May 24, 2012, doctors had successfully removed the tumor. For a while, he was declared cancer-free. But health troubles didn't stop there. In early 2013, Bobby admitted publicly that he was struggling with memory loss. He couldn't always remember his own songs, or even people's names. It was later confirmed that he was in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Finally, on June 27, 2014, at his home in Tarzana, California, Bobby Womack's long, complicated, and turbulent journey came to an end. He was 70 years old,